Finalist Debate 2016. Appearing for the government, we have NUJS 2. Appearing for side opposition, we have SRCC. And on the motion that this House will actively devalue professional stability in the pursuit of happiness, I invite the Prime Minister to open the case for side government.
Yeah. Watch it.
Where's time?
Okay, everyone, Unnati will be keeping time.
Please give me a minute now. Alright, may I begin? Sorry, who's the chairperson? Madam Speaker, the idea of the pursuit of happiness is one that allows us to celebrate stability in professional and private workspaces and private spheres of life. Today we're going to tell you how the idea of stability is especially celebrated in an urban middle class setup across jurisdictions, across continents, and across different cultures. The idea still being the same in its essence, which is that it's important for you to have a 9-to-5 job, it's important for you to have a car, it's important for you to be independent, it's important for you to be able to sustain yourself, etc., etc. Today, Madam Speaker, what we're going to tell you is that this idea of stability necessarily equates with an idea of routine. And the moment it does that, it completely ostracizes any other narrative that could exist, any other possibility or alternative that could exist, automatically making it a deviant form and thereby ensuring that people's choice is never actively exercised. For all these reasons, Madam Speaker, also, how are we going to prove this to you? First, we're going to talk to you about the equation between stability and routine. Next, we're going to talk to you about who ingrains this idea and who entrenches it so much, which we believe is mass media and society in general. Then we're going to talk to you about the manufacture of consent in this situation and how this consent permeates almost entirely, not allowing for the existence of alternatives. Next, we're going to talk to you about why that necessarily means that we must actively devalue, as the motion demands us to, because it's important to bring two different ideas to parity. Finally, I'm going to talk to you about the nature of this pursuit of happiness and the kind of alternatives that we suggest are a better option than what we think, than what side opposition is going to talk to you about. So without further ado, beginning with my first idea. Madam Speaker, please understand that the moment that the idea of stability gets equated to the idea of routine, you have two kinds of people that could exist. The first kind being people who are unhappy with the idea of a routine, and I'm sure there are a lot of us in this audience who relate to that. And I think that the moment that you understand that these people are people who could have legitimate grievances, people who could say, I am not interested in, let's say, going to college and getting the kind of job that everybody else seems to be getting, or wants to explore different other potential values, etc. The very moment that you don't allow for the existence of such a narrative, or the moment that you label this person's choice as a choice that is different from the choice that is made by a majority of people, it becomes a problem because this person faces a certain kind of social backlash which makes them uncomfortable with their own choices, if at all they're able to make this choice in the first place. And we're going to tell you that they are more often than not. The second idea, and this we think is a rebuttal that we have from side opposition, is what about the people who are actually happy with their routine? What about the people who are happy in the pursuit of happiness, which is that of routine? We completely reject that idea, Madam Speaker. We don't believe that you're happy, and we're not saying this because of some imposition of ideas, right? We're going to tell you how necessarily the pursuit of happiness is something that can only exist in a comparative situation. It can only exist in a situation where you have been able to look at different ideas, where you have had the freedom to be able to understand what your skills or passion may be, and you've been able to apply it in a particular form. And it's only when you've been able to work on this comparative and take a judgment-based call on what works best for you that you will truly be successful in completing the pursuit of your happiness. And we think that if you're not doing this, then it's incomplete for you to just come and say, but I'm happy with the routine, because we tell you that you haven't really attained the goal of pursuit of happiness, which this motion talks to you about. Right? Next comes the idea of what exactly is this idea of stability that I've already mentioned quite a few times, and why is it something that seems to completely overtake our consciousness? Madam Speaker, we tell you that the mass media especially plays two very, very important rules. The first rule is that it creates far too much unfair value on the norm. it creates too much of an unfair value on this idea of being a stable, successful person who is not right now. This is my 5th minute. The idea of a stable, successful person who's not traveling across the world, who's not doing XYZ activities, who's going to a company and working in a particular manner, and is ensuring that their life is stable, is ensuring that they have access to enough kind of cars, or like have a country club membership, etc., etc. It completely is excluding the idea of the existence of this person who wants to, let's say, travel and work in different places, or of a person who wants to explore, and I'm going to talk to you more about this more, but who wants to explore both theoretically and practically what their options in life are. And how is the media, how is this, sorry, and what is the operation of the media? First, it's valuing the norm of normalcy, of ensuring routine, which is done by, let's say, advertisements. So this entire idea of advertisements for home appliances, for that perfect tailored man who comes to a boardroom meeting, for that person who has like made it big in life and therefore is walking in with a Raymond suit, or all these like mixer grinder ads, everything that necessarily gives you this image of happiness and stability being essentially interlinked. That anybody who doesn't exist in this microcosm that seems to operate complementarily are people who the media does not seem to cater to, or who does not seem to consider as a part of this conventional narrative, right? So that's the aspect of valuing norm. How does the media devalue the norm, the kind of abnorm that we are telling you about? We tell you that, I mean, once again, the portrayal of people who do not subscribe to this norm is also very negative in the media. Just take the example of a tourist vacation, right? The idea that a vacation is always supposed to be a break from your routine. The idea that a vacation is supposed to be someone who's, had a really incredibly hard year, and now possibly gets, a little bit of off time to go and explore, and then come back, of course, to another really, really hard year. We believe that both situations necessarily ensure that the idea that we're finally getting sold to you is do X, don't you dare do negative X, because that's something that's simply not allowed. Now we come to the idea of why do you think this is why do we say this is manufactured consent? We don't just throw around the word saying, you're being told to do something, so that's manufactured consent. We're telling you how there is a continuous cycle that is being created here, because you've been told that yes, you must certainly buy into an idea. This idea requires you to have certain amounts of stability. Stability will necessarily require you to be able to adhere to this kind of routine. That routine is the only way in which you will be successful, is the only way in which you will have money, and if that is true, then you'll be able to use that money in order to buy the kind of products and goods that we're offering you. And if you do buy those goods and products, then your pursuit of happiness is complete. And therefore, that cycle keeps going on, and you don't really have a chance to break away from that. Which once again we tell you doesn't give you enough chance to break out of this and not buy that mixer grinder because you want to do it with a pestle and a mortar. Next, we come to the idea of why is active devaluation important and why is the government taking such a huge burden, right? Because we tell you that at this moment, once we've outlined to you the kind of complete imbalance of power that exists with regard to these narratives, there is something that the government has to do, that there's something that we as on this side believe they are obligated to do in order to restore balance to these alternatives, right? We believe that the existence of this alternative is in itself is not enough. There has to be some form in which the alternative is also sold, or at least made equally viable in the minds and perceptions of people. And we tell you that necessarily happens through our counter model, where we tell you that since we believe that the pursuit of happiness will only be facilitated through exploration, we would go along the lines of what a Martha Nussbaum and an Amartya Sen talk about when they talk about the capabilities approach, when they talk about the idea of or self-actualization by exploring a person's capabilities independent of giving any sort of value-oriented approach to them, and only eventually, once you factor in all of the certain situations of people, come up with a final conclusion. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Very, very proud to be here.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for his speech, and by the Leader of Opposition.
Chapter 3, 4, 5.
Can anyone know?
Want me to put it down?
I think this is good, right? Alright. Where's my time? So just start timing when I start.
I have my belly running through.
Madam Speaker, we reject this assertion that there is an imbalance of narrative in status quo right now. We think there has been a clear shift from this prominence given to having a 9-to-5 corporate job to abandoning everything, to kicking your keyboard out the window and backpacking across Europe and following your dreams, right? We think in terms of media, just the rise of movies like Into the Wild, like Walter Mitty, like abandoning everything you've worked for all those years, giving it up so that you can pursue like this abstract notion of like into the wilderness, finding my happiness over there. We think the prevalence of human interest stories like that appear in every kind of Reader's Digest or magazines, when you have op-eds, when you have these kind of articles shared across Facebook, when people take aspirational and inspirational value from the fact that a Harvard graduate like drops everything and does like something insanely niche and gets good at it or whatever, or abandons everything he's worked for. We think that's we reject that kind of narrative, right? In terms when they tell you that professional stability is necessarily something you need a college graduation for, that entails a 9-to-5 job, we reject that too. We think professional stability can come from things like cricket, from things like dancing and music, for which you don't need to go to college for, right? When they tell you that this routine will not lead to you achieving your goal of happiness, we tell you that doesn't happen in your paradigm either, right? We don't think, and given that this doesn't happen in either paradigm, it comes to a comparative of which are you better off in which scenario can you opt in to happiness once you are disillusioned with both your job or both like backpacking across the globe. Now, the human aim is to achieve some form of contentment, right? We think that the pursuit of happiness is, in this sense, a journey. We think that for some people, work provides the means to achieve this kind of happiness. In one scenario, and we reject like this workaholic shaming, right? We think in one scenario, your means are your end, right? We think that you can derive happiness from your job, that stability in fact gives you greater joy. And why is this important? We think it creates an incentive to be better at what you do, to develop a skill set. We think in the absence of like deriving happiness from your job, you're not going to take like additional courses, you're not going to be more interested in the field that you're working in or want to specialize in. Secondly, we believe that there are professions like doctors and engineers who provide really essential commodities, and for them we think it's extremely important to find happiness in your job, right? Especially when you're doing something that may in fact be thankless, we think that's important. We think, secondarily, there could be a situation in which your means provide the path to your ends. And in this case, when you earn money, right, when you save it and then you can spend it on the things that give you happiness, we are fine with both the job being the means and the end, and the job being the route to your end. But what do we have as a response to this idea of manufactured choice, of a routine necessarily not being your goal, right? We think that generational trends and fads are very important. In one generation, being a lawyer may be aspiration, in another, maybe being a doctor. We think necessarily that even this notion that you can like drop everything in your corporate white-collar job and like go backpacking across the globe, we think that even that is a narrative constructed by society, a narrative that is also a form of manufactured choice. And in this scenario, we don't think you should actively devalue either this narrative of backpacking or either this narrative of professional stability. But even if you want to devalue one of them, we don't think you should devalue professional stability, right? Because we think the likelihood of sustained happiness is greater when you have comes down to a clear comparative. We think you have the possibility of disillusionment on both sides. We think you can be really sick and weary of your stable job, and you can be really sick and weary of backpacking because you gave up everything you built a life on and you found that it didn't meet your expectations. In that kind of a scenario, when you're unhappy with both choices, in the first choice, when you still have a stable job, when you still have professional stability, you have the means to opt into stuff that makes you happy, even if you lose out, right? Even if you're unhappy, you can decide that I sucked at this job or I hated it, but then you can, like, whatever, take up fan fiction writing. Now, what does professional stability necessarily entail, right? We think it's more than just like whatever 9 to 5. We think it's capital. We think it's a source of income, of regular employment benefits, right? Of wealth consolidation. We think it's about not having to worry about your lower levels of the Maslow pyramid. We think it's about not having to worry about your basic needs or where your next meal comes from. We think the benefits are huge. We think firstly it gives you a safety net, right? Ensures that you can think about doing other things rather than worrying where your next meal comes from. But secondly, we think it's extremely important for the next generation, right? If you're bringing up children, right, we think you give them a greater range of options of what they want to go in for, because we think that even your happiness depends on your on your child's happiness, if like that's the kind of person you are. But we think also, why is capital essential, right? We think it's essential in accessing certain kinds of aspirations, certain kinds of jobs, right? We think you need a certain kind of capital to become a doctor. If medicine gives you, or studying about biology gives you that kind of happiness, you need some amount of money to study for that medical degree and be able to operate on a person. But we also think that there are people who are dependent on you, right? Dependent on you and your capital. People who are your burden. People whose happiness determines your happiness. We think that when backpacker parents go off and they have their babies on sling-bag backpacks or whatever, we think they are neglecting their children's education, right? We think they are neglecting their children's chance to, make friends with other people or live a normal life. We think those are things that they are prioritizing or compromising on for their own version of happiness. But fourthly, this idea of disillusionment. We don't think the narrative right now, we don't think the deviant narrative right now is doing what you love. We think the narrative that is gaining ground is more in terms of exploration, right? Of being in a constant state of flux, of trying on one profession and then shedding it in favor of another. And we disagree with this kind of glorification. Why? We think that people inherently need a sense of purpose and need stable relations to be happy. Relations with your society, relations with other human beings. When Time magazine comes out with an article about how a couple working this really rich corporate job left everything to backpack and 3 weeks later found that they were scrubbing toilets. We don't want to encourage that kind of narrative where people find disillusionment in following their dreams, right? When we tell you that if disillusionment can be found in both paradigms, we think our paradigm is the safer one. We are proud to oppose.
Thank the Leader of the Opposition for her speech, and by the Deputy Prime Minister.
Can I have a minute count? Madam Speaker, on the outside, we'd like to clarify that we as well reject this constructed idea of backpacking. Right? They can't reduce our case to backpacking and pretend to win this debate. We tell you that what we're advocating for is an exploration of the universe, and I'm going to be abstract, so deal with it. Right? The exploration of the universe in 2 prongs. First, theoretically, in terms of the exploration of thought, right? By going to university, studying philosophy, studying physics, or practically the exploration of space, traveling not in the conventional sense of backpacking, but traveling in the sense of being employed in different places, getting jobs in different places, being a farmer in one part of the world, choosing to be a lawyer because you're skilled enough to in another part, and looking for different jobs in different contexts. Right? We don't think we're advocating for backpacking. That's ridiculous. But let's look at the case that they've actually given to us today. Right?
First, she comes here and tells you that an imbalance in narratives doesn't actually exist because now travel is also considered to be cool, right? Two responses to this. First, we think that travel in itself is constructed as an exception to the norm of routine, which we have a problem with, right? We tell you that this idea of a vacation is something we have a problem with because we think exploration should be intrinsic to human condition and not an exception to this condition in the first place. But secondly, we tell you that this imbalance in fact does exist because even if you go on vacation, you're always told to actively prioritize your routine over that vacation, right? Come back, do your work, do your job. Like go on a vacation sometimes when you can afford it, but be back home, right? And we have a problem with that characterization and we request them to engage. Second, and this is actually really interesting, they tell you that dance and cricket and poetry and other forms of stuff can also be legitimate forms of occupation. And we think that's entirely true, right? Except professional stability stands very much against that. What professional stability does is hierarchizes certain vocations over others, makes you choose the certain profession that is going to give you most economic stability, right? It makes you want to be a corporate lawyer as opposed to going to Buster, something that is really, really problematic. It makes you not want to write poetry and generate a lot of income. And we definitely tell you, no one is playing cricket and no one is dancing in their paradigm. Everyone's looking for that 9-to-5 job. Third idea, workaholics can also be happy. They literally refuse to engage with the characterization that Archit gives us. He tells you, yes, workaholics may think they're happy, but where is this happiness coming from? We tell you that happiness is different from the pursuit of happiness because the pursuit of happiness is a comparative process, right? Where you weigh options, you travel, you explore, and not travel like backpack, but travel like explore options and decide which situation is actually making you happy, right? We tell you that if your options are restricted, that happiness is not legitimate. And secondly, we tell you that happiness is often coerced and manufactured, like Chomsky tells us, through the media, right? And in two forms. First, in the form of the fact that the idea of routine is manufactured and endorsed, right? Telling us that real estate is about getting the closest house to your occupation, telling us that you need that perfect washing machine, but also advocating that going to university and travel, both in the form of the tourism industry and in the form of studying, are very, very temporary things to the larger, more permanent idea of routine, a characterization that we reject and find extremely problematic. Then fourth, and this is the only actual idea that comes through from first speaker, is that the idea that people need money, right? And we tell you we obviously cannot stand against money in this paradigm, and that's not our burden, right? Our burden is tell you that we don't think a certain idea of routine is the only way to get to that end goal of money. We think that pursuing different jobs in different locations does not take away from that idea of stability, right? Third, and finally, they tell you that the narrative of backpacking is also constructed. We tell you yes very much, and we reject any form of constructed identity, and therefore we believe that actively revaluing the norm is extremely important so that the alternative and the norm are now at the same pedestal and people can actually explore it. And then this is really interesting. In our last minute, she actually tells us what the importance of professional stability is, because she tells you that professional stability gives you an interest and a sense of purpose. We reject that characterization because we don't think that professional stability necessarily gives you a sense of purpose. We think that often that takes away the sense of purpose from individuals who are in routine 9-to-5 jobs, who feel disenchanted, who feel disillusioned, who feel bored, who feel sleepy, and just don't want to do that stuff anymore, right? So we tell you it's really problematic if they come here and tell you that purpose is associated with permanence, when we tell you that purpose is often and can be associated with ideas of change. Two constructives that I'd like to talk to you about today. First, why the hierarchization of disciplines as hard and soft pursuits of knowledge happens on their side of the house. And second, why we think that's a parallel normalization of routine and the invisibilization of its harms. On the first idea of the hierarchization of disciplines as hard and soft knowledge, right? What do we think happens in this paradigm? We think that professional stability necessarily hierarchizes some forms of disciplines over others, right? You're told that it's best to, in fact, get the job that will give you the most money, and therefore you're taken away from your idea of passion. You're taken away from the idea of doing something that you actually want to do, right? And that is something that we see in societal structures around us. And how does this happen? It happens in a threefold manner. Mostly in terms of families putting pressure on young children in vulnerable situations, saying that you have to support us, go and get a job, right? Second, in terms of peers, the idea that the normal routine is to be a corporate lawyer, so to do something deviant and say I want to be a farmer is just peculiar to a lot of people, right? And third, people themselves actually start thinking that this is a normalized idea and start thinking that their passions are unsustainable and should be rejected, right? That their passions are unviable. And are these passions actually unviable, Madam Speaker? We think not. These passions are unviable because society tells us that the only way to make something viable is to subscribe to a constructed idea of routine. Last idea, the parallel normalization of routine and the invisibilization of its harms. This is the process that occurs every day when we watch TV or read in the newspaper, all the popular culture that she talked to us about, right? We tell you that what happens here is not only is the norm actually substantiated and furthered, but we tell you that the alternative is also put to a lower pedestal. And therefore, we necessarily have to actively devalue the norm so that the alternative and the norm are on the same pedestal, right? We think that the importance of exploring the world, both theoretically and practically, is what it allows people to actually fulfill their capabilities and needs to a true pursuit of happiness. We tell you not only is it considered to be not normal, it's also the harms of routine are considered to be invisible. People often don't see the harms associated with routine, and that is really, really dangerous because it affects them in their most vulnerable points, right? We tell you the invisibilization and the normalization of the harms of routine is extremely problematic, where people are coerced into an idea where they think they're happy without actually having explored the options that could lead them other forms of happiness, right? We tell you that the pursuit of happiness is only truly achieved when people recognize that their capabilities need to be fulfilled, right? We recognize that in certain situations, someone might be smiling and not like wanting to kill themselves in a 9-to-5 job, but that doesn't take away from the fact that the pursuit of happiness is only true when you're fulfilling your capabilities. Extremely proud to have won this debate.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister for his speech and invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition. Go ahead.
Ready? Madam Speaker, we think that this debate essentially at some level needs to be grounded, right? Let's understand a few simple things. The idea is this, that you can explore any and all choices, you can go ahead and identify any and all things, but we think you need to understand that there are certain means that you need to first make certain choices accessible in the first place, right? You can't just opt into anything and everything. We think the reason that side government can talk about this is precisely because they have some kind of capital wherein they firstly know about these choices and secondly can opt into those choices at a second level, right? But we tell you that only comes in when you have some kind of consolidation of capital, when you have some kind of basic safety net from which you can necessarily move on, right? We think at a second level, right, what is their argument? You should go from farmer to lawyer to 20 other things. We don't think that necessarily happens at two levels. At a first level, we think transferring from these jobs and moving from place to space requires you to certainly develop certain kinds of skill sets, right? We don't think you can constantly really go ahead and understand your capabilities till you consistently work in a field and go ahead and develop skill sets in that field in the first place, right? So we don't think you can go from farmer to now becoming a lawyer because you never really tried to get those skill sets in the first place. So we think that the argument that side government is running is largely utopic. We don't think we can live in a paradigm where that necessarily happens. But at a secondary level, right, we think your ability to access choices in terms of, for example, learning something like art, learning something like music is largely restricted to people with capital in the first place. And why is that the case? Because once they have said professional stability, they don't have to worry about basic needs. They don't have to worry about going ahead and finding the next meal. They don't have to worry about their children. They don't have to worry about multiple things. But what is this idea that they're running? We reject the fundamental premise that side government bases their case on, which is one where the dominant paradigm is one where you go ahead and devalue actively the idea that you should go ahead and explore. We don't think that is the current paradigm to begin with, right? We think there is plenty glorification of the idea of you going and exploring yourself. We think movies like Into the Wild and books like that, we think Walter Mitty, multiple ideas consistently talk about the idea. And we think specifically in Western liberal democracies, you consistently have a narrative that you should go ahead and find some kind of passion in your work, right? So we don't think that those narratives cease to exist in the first place, so we don't think we should do that. But primarily, before I move on to my constructive case, we think side government's case has largely been based on the fact that you should actively
value the idea of exploration, but never really telling us why you should actively devalue the idea of this thing, because they think let's make it a level playing field without really telling us why this ought to be deprioritized, right? Something they haven't told us across their first two speeches, but let's start bit by bit in terms of constructive analysis. At a first level, we tell you manufacturing of consent is necessarily non-unique. We think most of your choices are shaped by what you want to do. We think in, for example, university paradigms, you are more often than not swayed to go ahead and actually explore anything and everything, and at the end of the day, you might end up with discontent. Because in their paradigm, what if I go ahead and explore 5 options and don't like any of them? At the end of the day, disillusionment, we think, is largely non-unique, and we think manufacturing of choice is also largely non-unique. We think that's why we necessarily need to start this debate where side government has chosen to end it. But let's come to why this is essential. We think, what is this idea of capital that you necessarily accrue from going ahead and having some kind of professional stability? We think the idea of capital at a first level makes choices accessible to you in terms of this. And this is precisely the problem inside government's case. We think they have gone ahead and at some level made some kind of value judgment in terms of what people use that capital for. We don't think people will always use capital, for example, to buy a car. We think at the same time they can use that capital to do a course in art. They can use that course to go ahead and do multiple other things. So we don't think that necessarily stands on this side either. But at a second level, in terms of the idea of skill sets, we tell you that the pursuit of happiness is a variable construct. We think it varies from individual to individual. We think precisely why they need to give us at some level a burden in terms of why you should devalue this metric of going ahead and finding your means of happiness or your pursuit of happiness through this paradigm, something they haven't told. But let's tell you why it is possible to go ahead and have a pursuit of happiness through the paradigm of you going ahead and having this culture of like having professional stability. But what does this necessarily mean? This necessarily means that you identify what you want to do, and in that paradigm, you consistently work towards improving yourself. You consistently work towards going ahead and improving your skill sets. You consistently work towards going ahead and learning more and more within that paradigm so that you become the best within that field. We think that is also a scope of you going ahead and returning that kind of happiness. Why is that a paradigm we ought to devalue? The idea of routine. We think, what does routine necessarily mean? And we recharacterize this idea of routine. The idea of routine is in terms of the idea of, at some level, dedication as well. In terms of you going ahead and saying, I will go ahead and do riyaz for my music every single day. I will go ahead and do practice in sports on a daily basis. We think that also falls into the paradigm of routine. We don't think at that level, those means should be deprioritized at that level. In that scenario, we think this is the process through which you can gain happiness. But further, what are other means through which individuals gain happiness? No, sit down. We think the pursuit of happiness also is contingent for individuals in terms of how they interact with other human beings, right? And that interaction, more often than not, is to proximal entities in your life. For example, your immediate family, right? In terms of how you go ahead and take care of them. We think professional stability allows individuals to deprioritize their work life or their career goals, and at that level, for example, take care of their children, right? It allows, for example, your husband to possibly be a stay-at-home husband and take care of your children. So we think that the idea of you going ahead and using professional stability can also provide happiness to multiple individuals. We don't think it always ought to be used in the paradigm that side government is necessarily asking you to use it for. But further, moving on to the idea of this idea. Before that, your question.
So you say that the pursuit of happiness can vary for different people. When we tell you that this kind of professional stability narrative necessarily glorifies the professional stability, don't you think that's a problem in terms of allowing other people to find their narrative?
Alright. In that paradigm, we think side government's case is you should also glorify the idea of doing the other thing, but not really telling us why you should actively devalue this. Because if your case is you can glorify both narratives, and that's precisely what we've told you. Glorify both narratives. In that scenario, an individual's ability to pick that isn't really compromised. We ask them a question in terms of why it is not okay for people working in essential services to prioritize that kind of life and prioritize that kind of thing, because we think at some level there is aspirational value attached to those things as well, right? For example, the idea of acing an IIT exam, right? Even though it might be based on some kind of generational trend, we think it is fine for those individuals at that level to opt into that, right? But coming to the next level of analysis in terms of a clear counter-characterization, right? We think this argument they bring up of deviant actually falls on the side of side opposition, right? Because what your paradigm does now is necessarily say you are a deviant if you don't opt into the idea of going ahead and being consistently in flux, right? But why is there a scenario? This is where we bring it to a comparative. We tell you firstly, if your case is going ahead and devaluing it, bring it up in Gauwave finally. But at that level, we tell you in a scenario where it is actively glorification on both sides, we still think professional stability is a good idea. Why is that? Because at the end of the day, after you've tried, let's say, 5 choices of what kind of job you want to do, you've done this like journey of self-exploration. In a comparative, on our side, you've done a professional stability in terms of a job. We think the ability of you going ahead and like having those choices is the same. We're very, very proud.
Who's keeping time? Can you give me a minute, Ron?
Mr. Speaker, it's really amusing that in arguing for their side, they have actually caved into our assumption itself. Because let's take a quick look at what Akash came and told you. He came and told you that you have to start with this premise that you require certain means to make certain choices accessible. And these means are you having or retaining your 9-to-5 job, getting capital out of it, and then channeling it for your passions itself, right?
Sure.
And herein is where they cave into our analysis of how entrenched, how important, and how like intrinsic it is to possess that 9-to-5 job itself, and how much we have been indoctrinated to believe that it's this kind of stability that we need to channel to our alternate passions itself, right? The case on this side of the house, from first two speeches itself, has been that A, the importance of passions, the importance of you pursuing alternate careers if you want, and B, you making money from pursuing these passions itself, as opposed to you retaining a stable 9-to-5 job and using this money to channel towards your passions, which basically means they buy our analysis on how narratives on pursuing your passions are devalued to the extent that mass focus is given towards like holding on to stable professional jobs itself, right? And here's where they've made a really great concession towards our case itself, right? But before I even go into thematizing this debate, a few rebuttals to what came from DLO, right? First, he comes in and tells you the importance of capital itself and why you need this capital for exploration, right? A, again, like I said, the premise of having a job itself and how that's really problematic. And B, how this itself caves into our analysis of how normalized this narrative has become, right? Second, he comes in and tells you that you need routine because routine is the only way, apparently, again, causal link made without analysis, of how it's the only way you can imbue dedication in people, right? We tell you this dedication can be achieved even if you have like really transient jobs, right? Say I'm a farmer for 1 year at Paris, a lawyer for another year somewhere else in Europe, and another year spent just like exploring, studying in my room and lecturing in my room and studying physics, right? Each of these things give you equal amounts of dedication as well. So tell us why dedication is mutually exclusive to having a stable job itself, when on this side of the house we tell you in fact dedication is furthered A, because you're pursuing what you actually want to pursue, right? Come and prove these things to us. Second, even if I buy this analysis of how a routine job makes you dedicated, we have problems with this to begin with itself, right? And why is that? We have problems with it because people are coerced into believing that they are happy and dedicated only if they have this job, right? Again, going back to our characterization analysis, really good analysis that came out from a constructive speakers that was literally unclashed by this side on how mass media constructs certain choices itself, right? So even if I buy into this analysis of how a 9-to-5 professionally stable job gives you dedication, we tell you it's problematic that we let that narrative persist, right? Why is it? Look at how this narrative has been shaped and how it's been entrenched by mass media, right? We tell you that as of now, the importance given or the large amounts of focus given to stable jobs in a variety of ways, right? How do you sell real estate? By telling people to take a house close to where they work. How do you sell commodities? By telling them, hey, you have to work for 12 hours a day, so here, hey, take this washing machine that will do laundry while you're away at work. Again, how does tourism work? People tell them that you will only take vacations as a break from jobs and will not, and that's how even like supplies for tourists are generated, right? We tell you, hey, at one level, that is the way that this narrative of devaluing what pursuing alternate passions itself has come to. But second, even for those who do want to pursue these alternate passions, who do not want to subscribe to this idea of like professional stability, how has this alternate narrative been shaped, right? It's been shaped it's been to trivialize people who deviate from this norm, right? Look at sitcoms itself and look at pop culture. They're either made the butt of jokes or they're made out to be deviant rebels itself, right? And we have problems with this characterization. The fact that made out to be rebels, the fact that they're made out to be trivial or just plain trippy hippies who want to travel all across the world. We have problems with this characterization because in doing that, that is where you devalue this alternate narrative itself. And in devaluing it is where our analysis on the imbalance of these narratives kick in, right? So here's where the third point of Akash coming and tell you that they're okay with glorifying both narratives to the same extent. We on this side of the house stand against that. Why is that? Because we've given you enough analysis on how one narrative has been ridiculously placed above another narrative. And the only way that you pull these two narratives the same path is to devalue the more dominant narrative that exists, which is one that places ridiculous importance on having a professional 9-to-5 job itself, right? That. Third, he comes in and tells you how pursuit of happiness means in this pursuit of happiness also involves like interacting with your family members, and you cannot interact with them if you don't subscribe to their notions of having a 9-to-5 job, or that you can't devalue your career options. Intuitively nonsense, because again they bought into a characterization of how even for your family members or even for your peers, it's that entrenched that the only way they will sustain a conversation with you is if you are on this paradigm of having professional stability in the way that we have defined it for you, right? And this idea that you will devalue your career options, we tell you again, in using words like this, you came into an analysis of what a career itself is. You came into an analysis of how you will only have a career that gives you one constant source of income, residing in one city and having that one job. And we stand against all of these things, right? But now let me get back to thematizing this debate itself. At one level, we've spoken to you about how these narratives work. We've spoken to you about why it's really, really important that at this stage, we tell people that it's okay to have like alternate passions. It's okay to pursue these passions. And you must in fact go ahead and do it without facing any form of social backlash that you do face. Because understand that in status quo, there are two kinds of people. Those who are apparently happy with their professional jobs, which this side of the house seems to think is like legitimate happiness, and two who are unhappy with these conventional jobs itself, right? To those who are happy, we've tried to explain to you, and I think we've done it sufficiently well, how this happiness itself is constructed. And for those who are unhappy, they really don't have an option to get out of the system itself, right? Because the ridiculous amounts of social backlash they face from the very same people that opposition speaks to you about, from their family, from their peers, and from within themselves itself, right? They aren't able to break out of this norm themselves, that it's okay to be able to spend 1 year like farming in some part of Europe, or 1 year sitting in my room and studying physics, because even in doing that, I am exploring the universe, I am learning, and I am happy doing it, and that's a good thing, and it's okay, right? This is the amount of ridiculous amounts of backlash they face, and it's problematic that in status quo this doesn't exist. But let's look at their best case as well, right? Even in their best case, if I have a professional job, even if I am happy, we tell you that that's really problematic because it's not true happiness. And on our side of the house, even if you are happy and you don't make money, which apparently is really, really imperative according to opposition, at least you're realizing your true capabilities. You're realizing what actually makes you happy. And we tell you as a natural consequence of realizing these capabilities, you will end up making money, because please tell me why I won't be efficient when I'm doing something I actually enjoy, right? And thus, for all these reasons, I'm really, really proud to propose this.
Yeah, this really helped.
Can I start?
Madam Speaker, if you notice the stories about individuals who quit these so-called 9-to-5 jobs and go ahead and do anything, they'll always be about a rich lawyer who abandoned all of these things. They'll always be about a Harvard student who left and did this thing. Will you ever hear about a poor guy who suddenly reached Australia out of a sudden and became a farmer? No, you won't. We think it's only these rich kids who have access to these choices. We think their case is as rich rich as those kids, right? It's fair enough for you to argue we want exploration. In what scenario is this exploration better is a question you need to ask yourself to judge this debate. Saying that people in a routine are not happy is as much a value judgment as saying that an individual cannot be a singer. It's as though necessarily you are compromising on one section of a society. The logical extension to their backlash argument that these individuals are facing a backlash because that's a dominant narrative is also that if you make their paradigm the dominant narrative, there is also a backlash on those individuals who enjoy their routine lives. There's also a backlash on individuals who like being 9 to 5. So necessarily you are compromising on one section of the society. If it's not cool to tell a kid that he can't follow his passion, why is it alright for you to do this to a doctor? Why is it alright for you to do this to a lawyer? Something they haven't answered. This trade-off needed to be justified on their behalf for them to win this debate, right? Okay, what have they not gone ahead and engaged with us at all? We reject the notion that professional stability necessarily is 9 to 5. We tell you it's the fact that you're doing something consistently, right? We come and tell you that you're now, and okay, it's really simple. You're now in a time and space where there is a greater number of jobs available. They set the debate to be the urban middle class, while we come and tell you the urban middle class now has access to the internet, they have access to globalization, a far greater number of jobs available to them. You don't just have to be an engineer, you can be an app developer. We don't think now you only have these so-called jobs which are fixed. You can't just be a doctor or an engineer. You can be a fashion designer. You can work in so many other sectors in this time and age. We think that is important. In this scenario, it is hugely unfair for them to come and tell you that the only jobs you have are these 9 to 5. You can obviously be a teacher with more time at your disposal. We don't think it's fair for them to do this, right? They haven't engaged with us on this idea of capital consolidation. Understandable why they didn't engage with it, given the fact that they don't think capital is important at all. They seem to think that we exist in this fluid world, right? But the world is real. To travel, you need money. To get access to choices, you need money. They haven't justified us to use this, right? We come and tell you that, hey, generation fads are different every year. Therefore, you are making a value judgment. Second, access to choices is better. When you give a woman in a family a consistent income, irrespective of how small it is, the fact that she gets that income every month allows her to say educate herself, allows her to say educate her children. This gives her access to a greater number of choices. No, not right now. What we are saying is pretty simple. It doesn't matter if the amount of money you're getting in your bank is massive every month. What matters is that still you're getting some basic amount of money consistently, because it allows you to deviate from basic needs and then explore talents, explore choices, explore capabilities. We think it's problematic for them to talk about fulfillment of capabilities, because we do think at the end of the day, if you want happiness from being a singer, you have to be a good singer. You can't be a sucky singer, right? Because you will derive happiness only when you are good at an activity. No, please sit down. And the fact that to be good at an activity, you need to work at skill sets. To work at skill sets, you need to be consistent. That's something we told you consistently. They haven't justified why dependency of other individuals is something you can compromise, because we do think you are compromising it. You are creating a rhetoric where it is fair for you to put aside the interests of individuals who are dependent on you. It is fair for you to put aside the interests of individuals dependent on your consistent capital every month. Just because you derive certain happiness from doing 5 jobs, we also don't think you will get the job of a lawyer if you don't have the skill sets for it. Like I said, we think it's rich for them to argue that. No, please, just a minute. Alright, now on this clash of the media, right? We agree that a manufactured choice exists in both sides. Number one, we disagree that necessarily there's a dominant narrative. We do think that lots of movies in this time and age do exist. It's not just Into the Wild, it's also see something like an Eat, Pray, Love. Constantly you are being told that you need to leave and go behind these things. We say it's a generational trend, it's a generational fad, right? At a second level, they have to justify why glorifying one thing isn't enough. Let's take what they've said. They've said, look, there are unequal levels that exist. If this is the dominant narrative of it being 9 to 5 jobs, and this is the narrative of, well, following your passions, why can't you just lift this one up? Why do you need to bring the other dominant narrative down? Isn't something they have justified to us. They have to justify to you. Why not glorification? This motion is in this house will glorify that narrative. This motion is this house will devalue devalue the other narrative. Why is it fair for you to make that value judgment? Isn't something they have proven to us. Not right now. Alright, you're clear.
Can you only use capital to explore your passions, or often can your passions through exploration also generate capital?
But you still have to do that thing consistently to be able to make some money out of it. I mean, no one's going to pay you to be a singer if you're a terrible, terrible singer. You have to be decent enough to do it. We think it's problematic for them to run this case on these weird assumptions. So basically, what is their primary case been, right? From their first speech onwards, they've told you that listen, we think we want this meta idea of exploration, and we've asked you in what scenario is this exploration better? In what scenario is it possible? Why we asked you to consider the idea of disillusionment is simple, because what they're saying is, look, you're not always happy doing what you're doing. Agreed. Now imagine you're an individual who's had 5 different jobs. Now you're unhappy of your 5th job. No one's willing to hire you for your 6th job. Versus, so you don't even have a safety net to fall back on. Versus, I'm a doctor, I'm tired of being a doctor, I want to be an author, but like say Chetan Bhagat, at least I have the money I earned from being an engineer to be able to publish my books. We think that's where this case lies. Where can you explore your talents? Where can you explore your choices? Where can you go ahead and access a greater number of choices to do every single thing that they want you to do? They want you to travel, they want you to not take a vacation just because it's a break. For that you need a lot of money, right? What we've told you is very simple. A, it's not okay for you to devalue one narrative because you are making a value judgment. Why can't you just glorify the other one? We don't know. Secondly, all you want is exploration. In our case, there's exploration and a safety net and wealth consolidation. And I think that's okay. That was very practical.
Are you ready? Madam Speaker, we think side government has largely misconstrued the burden that side opposition took in this debate. We don't think, and this is simply voting like government whip over here. Government whip comes up and tells us we need to tell people that that is also okay. That is also something you can do. That is also something that is nice. We think their burden in this debate was to tell us why that is better. When side opposition clearly took the burden and said you shouldn't make that value judgment. If you want to say it is okay, go ahead and say it is okay. We agree with you. Tell people that that is also okay. We don't think they have still told us why you should actively devalue that narrative. What was their fundamental premise to this? The fundamental premise at the first level was the fact that mass media purely runs on this narrative. We tell you we reject that narrative in the first place as well. We think a culture of dropouts also exists in terms of billionaire entrepreneurs coming out of that, right? So we don't think that the dominant narrative is necessarily one that exists like that. But what was our burden in this debate? We'll clarify it. Our burden in this debate was simple, to tell you that you can also go ahead and achieve happiness through the path of a stable job. That was simply our burden. What is side opposition to argue with you? They said disillusionment can only happen in your scenario. In our scenario, nobody can be disillusioned. We think side opposition in this debate was reasonable and fair enough to say, yes, disillusionment can happen in our scenario, and it can also happen in your scenario as well. We think in that scenario, why should you only rationalize that disillusionment through the paradigm of exploration, something they haven't told you in this debate. But let's understand why you can also, and that's simply, and I'm going to use that word also again because that's what we've argued to in this debate, you can also attain that happiness through that paradigm, something they haven't engaged with. We told you that routine can mean dedication, routine at the same time can also mean disillusionment. Why you should deprioritize the idea of someone using it for dedication, something they haven't told you because they said routine is bad because routine is bad. It is because the fact that routine is tautological reflects how tautological their argument is in this debate. But let's come to the clear analysis of how you can do it. We think yes, they say no, you are caving into our narrative. No, we aren't. We aren't caving into anything you are saying. All we're saying is a person can at some point say, I will go ahead and do something else using the capital I have. He can go and get happiness through that. We think he can get happiness through his relationships. We think he can get happiness from consistently constantly trying to be the best lawyer that he wants to be the best engineer. Why is that not a paradigm? Why is that kind of dedication or that kind of success not something that the society should deem legitimate? It's something that they haven't engaged with. What we told you is even in our paradigm, that disillusionment, exists means for you to go ahead and reconcile that. Why can you reconcile disillusionment in our paradigm as well? It's precisely because you have capital and you also have certain skill set. The response to that is no. Be this like free bird that goes ahead and first becomes a farmer, then becomes a lawyer, then becomes 20 other things. We asked them something they haven't answered to us in this debate. What is the utility of that? What are you really getting out of this exploration apart from doing 5 different jobs? They haven't really told us why that is a dominant paradigm that they necessarily want, a burden that they took up because they said, your paradigm is bad entirely. We think your paradigm of routine shouldn't exist at all. Tell us why the dominant paradigm, wherein some person doesn't want to really explore, should be told that no, what you're doing is necessarily wrong. Something side government did not clarify across their debate, and all those simple debating mechanics, they lose that debate. But let's come to analysis that they completely ignored. We think at some level they got so caught up in their own case that they kept talking about the fact that routine goes ahead and doesn't make people realize the fact that they do not like it. We told you this. We think people use that routine very, very differently, right? We think, for example, some people say, I will work till 40 and then I will do something else. We think it's a legitimate ground for you to get happiness. That is not to say everyone should only get happiness just by working till 40 and then doing that. If someone else wants to do something else, they can still go ahead and opt into that through the paradigm that they necessarily want. We think Western liberal democracies more often than not have had narratives that you should find passion in your workplace, that you should go ahead and find passion in your work. If you want to be a cricketer, be a cricketer. If you want to be an artist, be an artist. But at no point do they say that do not be a doctor, do not be this. Something the side government has tried to argue to you in this debate very, very badly and not really done that successfully. We asked you to quote them, and this is we are quoting them in the fact. They said that glorifying them is not enough because you need to go ahead and bridge the gap. We tell you why is that bridging the gap one, where you should pull something else down rather than just pushing something else up and saying it is okay. We are very, very proud to win this debate.
Madam Speaker, it's really funny that in their last 2 speeches where they refuse to take POIs and then in reply, they make this case a completely comparative binary where they tell you we're okay with doing both things.
Sure.
Right? They literally tell you we're okay with doing both things and we think both things should be glorified and one thing should not be devalued. Ridiculous, but 4 questions that we think you should adjudicate this debate on. First, is our case only accessible to rich kids with capital? Second, is this narrative on professional stability actually glorified in status quo and therefore does it need to be devalued? Third, will skill completely be lost on our side, which again came in whip? And finally, which side caters better to happiness, right? On the first idea of is our case only accessible to people with capital? They come here and tell you yes, because travel is expensive and it's a privilege that only rich kids have, right? What did we tell you to that? We told you that we don't think that we're subscribing to their idea of capital where you go backpacking, except when you actually go to certain places, employ yourselves in different structures, in different fields, we think it's extremely important that capital exists on our side as well. The only response to that is no one will employ you because you don't have skill. To which again, very, very late matter, to which we tell you, and we asked you this, right? We don't think that, and Ramya talked to you about this, we don't think that skill is necessarily only acquired if you spend your entire life doing something, right? We don't have to give you an exact time period of a year. We think that if you're 7 years a farmer and then 8.5 years a lawyer, you acquire skill and you live like a pretty good life with a lot of capital, right? So it's really not about giving you a time period. And please don't put in skill in whip and expect us to I don't know how regard it, right? Anyway. Then they come here and tell you that, so that second question, is this narrative on professional stability actually glorified and should it be actively devalued? They come here and tell you, no, this narrative on professional stability and routine is not actively glorified because Into the Wild, there are movies like Into the Wild which make travel seem cool. Literally the level of analysis that we get on why this narrative is not glorified. What we tell you on our side of the house is that media structures have vested interest in selling certain products, both in terms of viability and endorsing the norm, as well as devaluing the alternative, something they do by making sure that they endorse real estate, by making sure that they endorse certain things like household goods, and also making sure that they seem making tourism and education certain trippy alternative things that are not accessible to the common person within that paradigm, right? We tell you that therefore this narrative is glorified by media houses through structural systems, and the only engagement we get from this side is no, it's not glorified because Into the Wild, right? And only rich kids watch Into the Wild anyway. Anyway, so I mean, on the idea of whether this should be actively devalued, now that we admit that something has been glorified, we therefore think that this should be actively devalued, so people should be able to make a rational decision between two options, right? We think glorifying both is as ridiculous as actively, we think that actively devaluing both is a better option because in this case, rational decisions are actually made as opposed to like spending energy and saying both of these things are really, really good things. Like that's ridiculous and contradictory from their side. Third, with skill be completely diluted on our side. And this is where it gets really interesting. They tell you skill will be completely diluted because no one will employ you because you're doing this thing only for 1 year. And how are you a skilled farmer if you're doing it only for 1 year? Two responses to this, one which came out in my speech and one in my speech. Right? We don't think that skill is diluted because we think that you can spend enough time doing these activities, but the permanency of your entire life does not be spent doing one thing. Right? But secondly, we also tell you that true dedication and true skill is actually achieved if you actually give a shit about the stuff you're doing. If you're actually interested in the stuff you're doing, which is something that is catered to better on our side. We think skill and dedication is definitely a class that we take. Finally, which side caters better to happiness? They come and tell you that disillusionment exists on both sides, right? We tell you that disillusionment on their side is entrenched and invisible and people don't recognize it. We tell you that if people are disillusioned on our side as well, they have options to make sure that they move from one profession to another, to make sure that they actually explore their capabilities and do not actually get disillusioned. On the idea that we will actually talk to you about why this narrative of routine troubles so many of us, on the idea of how we can get over it, and on the idea of happiness and lots of utopian shit. Extremely proud of Amnesty.
नहीं, just like click the coding, wind up for tomorrow.
Bro, next level cheating. Yeah, we all believe you won. Yeah. And this is like one of the best, like, we are each other. पता नहीं क्या होगा. Bro, but this
I haven't thought about it actually. Like, also, it doesn't make sense. What if, like, we have like 333 or whatever, like 3332 or something. Like, 76, 78, 78. Let's not do that. 78.
Guys, please take your pizza boxes and water bottles with you, or we'll have to stay back and clean it. Please throw it on your way out. Thank you.
You doing that? 20 मिनट लगेगा मेरे 5 मिनट लगेगा नहीं 4 people were
लोग कट रहे हैं मास्टर Okay, you have to shut this off, guys.
Yeah, even Hira didn't. I'm sorry, yeah.